This is going to work. Really nice.
A handful of years ago, I took a workshop with the people at Natural Pigments, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with that company, they're fantastic. I'm not being paid to say this, I'm just telling you that when I buy my own art supplies, 9 times out of 10, I'm buying something from Natural Pigments. At this workshop, the people running it, George and Tatiana, mentioned something about making paint. They said, if you go out into the hillside and you see a beautiful cut of color, it would probably make a really good paint. And all you really have to do is get a shovel and a bag and take a couple of scoops home with you. I wanted to know, could it really be that simple? The answer might surprise you. It's really that simple. So let me walk you through the process of doing this and see if this is something that you might like. The first thing you're going to need is pigment. You got to go get the dirt.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Stay down.
Hi.
Hi.
So which way should we go?
So this gets pretty steep.
This one or that one? Or yes?
Yes. But we should go this way and we can check it out down here.
It's kind of tricky on the hills. You know what I mean? But it's like all the property is on the other side of the hill.
That's a different color for around here,
That's
right?
yeah, that's totally a different color.
Okay.
Sliding. Ooh. It's like green.
It is. Pretty cool.
After you've collected your pigment, it's time to start processing it. The way you do that is by sifting and grinding the particles down, as well as cleaning it. I start by taking my dirt collection and running it through a sieve. This is going to remove some of the larger particles as well as some of the organic material. You can use that stuff if you want at some point. I tend to collect it, set it aside, come back to it later just in case. Now it's time to begin washing it. I use a series of jars, jugs, and distilled water. Put some of that coarse sand pigment into a jar and fill it with distilled water. Agitate it aggressively. What this is going to do is break up all of the particles, it's going to remove the organic material, and you're going to be left with pigment that is settled to the bottom. I will do this process, cleaning off the organic material in between phases, multiple times until I've run into clean water that is showing no signs of organic material in it. When I've reached that point, I know that the pigment is clean and it's ready to be turned into paint. The next thing that I'll do is get finer particles out of this collection of clean pigment. Shake it vigorously again, and instead of letting it settle, take that muddy, murky water and pour it off into another container. I'll do this several times until I get the desired amount of pigment from that process. Once I have this collection of fine pigment particles, I will strain the water off of it and let it dry completely. There's ways to accelerate this process. I tend to just let the jar sit open in the air in my studio for several days. It might take a week or two doing it this way. Once that pigment is fully dry, it can now be turned into paint. Since I've let the process of sifting and washing my pigment reduce the size of my particles, I don't have to do too much grinding, but I will still take this pigment and put it into a mortar and pestle for some grinding. I'll take some of the pigment and mix it with oil to see what kind of paint it will make. When you're going through this process, you can do things like take notes about its consistency, its texture, whether it took a lot or a little oil for it to become a paint. You can even measure it out if you want to get very specific. Once the paint is actually made, I will do a couple of tests. I will test the paint as an opaque color. I will test the paint as a transparent color, and I will test it as a tint by adding titanium white. The final test that I will do is a rudimentary light fastness test. I take the paint that was made, cover half of the card that it was placed on with black cardstock, and I set it in a window that's north facing for a couple of months. After that time has passed, I'll take the black cardstock off and see if there was any fading that was done in the exposed area of the card. If you don't see any fading in the paint, there's a good chance that it's quite light fast. Now I know you might be thinking, why would I go through all of that trouble for a tube of paint that might end up looking like burnt sienna, and I can get a really good version of that for like 12 or 14 bucks? I hear you. I don't do it because I think it's the best way to get your pigment. I don't do it because I think it's the best way for you to make paint. Locally sourcing your own pigment provides opportunity that you can't get otherwise in a couple of ways. Earth colors are everywhere, and they can be personal to me and the place that I live with the experience that I have. There's no other place in the world that is going to produce the paint that you just made. The other thing that it does, it also provides you with an experience and an intimacy with your materials that you could have never otherwise gotten. Think about it. Go out into the nature around you, collect pigment that's personal to the place that you live, and turn that into paint. You can't buy that. That may be waxing poetic. That may be cheesy. I know that for me, it was good enough for Michelangelo and Leonardo. I think it's good enough for me too.